I'm John Travis here in Mullumbimby, New South Wales on the 28th of December, talking to Jana Stara, who is in the Canary Islands, vacationing from her home in Czech Republic. And it's 8 a.m. there and 7 p.m. here. This is the longest time gap I've recorded. So welcome.
Thank you, Jack.
Oh, I forgot to mention the year. It's 2019, yes.
Still.
So I've asked you to let us know who you are and why. You're one of the shining stars, the only one I know of in the Czech Republic, having launched a number of programs there at the university and on your own, and we'll have links to some of your programs in the narrative. But how did you start out? What was your earliest memories of wanting to do something even remotely related to wellness? Like, did you play nurse as a little girl or what?
No, not even slightly. As a little girl, I played with the cars.
Oh, okay.
I played with the baby dolls. But since a very early childhood, I was amongst people who were in sports, mainly as teachers. So I have always been around people who have that sparkle, who have that energy and are quite lively and active. And then when I was choosing my career, when my grandfather was asking what I will be doing, I always said, of course, I don't know. And I started as a journalist, but then it had to be a joint degree, and I started journalism and physical education. And for me, that was like, okay, so I will do the physical education like my mom. I didn't ever feel any passion for it, but it was always around and it felt easy. And across all the years, I have studied subjects or courses or even degrees in the economical faculty and the faculty of social sciences, but always my tracks led me back to the sports, to the kind of people that I could live with, that I could really like talk with and be friendly with. The others felt like very serious. So that was my rather personal, unconscious choice that within this field I could do something, or I could at least feel good. Between the others, I felt like, yeah.
What a choice. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It just came natural. And in between the lines in the physical education studies, there always is the preconception that physical movement or physical activity is good for our health. And that if we move, we will be feeling good. And then as a past almost professional sportswoman and being around professional people, sometimes it felt like the sports do the opposite to the people on their physical bodies. There were so many broken people were around me, including me, with all the little injuries. And even on the social side, the relationships in the sports field are not so optimal. So yeah, even though I still wasn't clear or which direction, I was sure that maybe teaching was not my future. I wish I knew more back then. I went for my first internship abroad when I was the second year at my university, and I went to Portugal. And out of that, I wrote my first bachelor thesis about comparing the bodies of Portuguese and Czech students. We had the classes of anthropometry, and the conclusion of my bachelor paper was that I have a body of an average Portuguese man. It was like, oh wow, oh interesting. Science says so it must be true, right? And it was on the second stay abroad, the second year of my master's, the first year of my master's, when I went to Denmark, and that's where I met wellness.
And how did you meet wellness?
I was for a semester in Gerlo Idrettshøjskole, which in Denmark they have this special type of, how to say, schools that the students take in their gap year between high school and university. And those are rather non-formal schools. And our school was about sports. So even as a university student, I could join this for a semester. And we had a class, it was something like International Sports for All Leadership Education. And it was taught by Bergen. He was the headmaster of the school, and he was by then also involved in the World Health Organization. Very funny guy, and he was, before he became the headmaster, he was at the university in Aarhus in Denmark, and he was involved in a workplace wellness field. And in the 90s, somewhere in the 90s, he also visited the National Wellness Conference in the States. And he was so much fitting into your gang, like really, really lively person, very energetic. And he was very passionate about what he was trying to put across, that it's not only, the professional sport, but also about the other forms of education that we can do to people in between the lines of their physical activity. And yeah, he gave a lecture about the movement recommendations, what the World Health Organization is recommending. And then he asked the simple question, what is wellness? Yeah, nobody ever asked me before. I did hear the word before, but I never thought of it because it was just somewhere around hanging, on the hotels and in the wellness centers. So in my head was something like a passive care of our bodies, something. I wasn't really clear how to phrase it. And his answer was the 5 definitions that are in your workbook, showing us the 5 aspects of wellness.
Oh, really?
And I was like, wow, I surely didn't expect that. And it was like an opening a completely new gate in my mind, because I went to Denmark in search for a topic for my master's thesis. And I thought it could be interesting to continue in my bachelor research, but since that class, it was done. I remember standing in his office, asking him for something about wellness. I needed something to feed my brain with. And he took out the workbook and he said, I guess this is the book you're searching for. And so, yeah, that was the truth. I searched for it unknowingly. I read the book. And of course, on the first read, I didn't do the inventory at all. I didn't feel like I need one, but I read all the theory. I fed my brain with all these new ideas, and I continued searching on. So what I spent my following 3 months in the free time between our classes, I was just Googling the internet because I was so surprised by the difference between what I read in your book and the perception of wellness that I had from the lived experience. So I was trying to understand. So I was leaving Denmark with a pile of papers. My room was covered with papers, and through that search, I ran into Don Ardal's blog. So I read some of his articles, and it was in 2010. So it was by the time when the Biden Global Spa Institute published their report about spa and wellness, how this could work together. So that was my foundational findings. Yeah, it was through
Now,
the theory.
was this still in Denmark when you encountered the book?
Yeah, that was Denmark, and then I returned back home, and I spent 2 more years trying to figure it out. And in Czech Republic until these days, there is not much, or at least in my town, at my university, there is not much literature about wellness. So I maybe I shouldn't say it, but I wrote my master's thesis based on the Google search. So I Googled everything that I could, and I was like a little spy. At one point, I even found a report about Halbert Dunn when they were trying to create the International Statistics Institute or something, and they had a meeting in Prague. So you can imagine me, and I was sitting by the table, like, super excited that Helbert then was in Prague. Unfortunately, they had the meeting on the day when the Second World War broke. So that was a report about how they actually met, but then had voted for the meeting to be cancelled. And everybody voted yes, of course, there's the German troops coming over. So it was interesting. I ran into interesting things, and I had no clue how to tie it together to write a master thesis.
But you eventually did. And what was the title of your thesis?
It was 2013. I actually wrote two theses because I was doing two master degrees. One was in physical education, one was in management. So I split, one of the theses was about the theory and history, trying to pull together and write in the Czech language about the original concept and trying to make sense of it in my mind also. And then the second one was about how to put this across, how to teach wellness without giving like an oral presentation, but using more practical methods of experiential learning.
Now, I know when we first visited you there, we got a tour of the university and all the fancy equipment and rooms, and I was impressed. Quite an operation. And your role at the university again, or not again, but is, or what's your
I'm now teaching wellness courses. Somehow by magic, I managed to inject a few wellness classes into the curriculum. So
magic?
there is
you're utilizing magic. Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. So I'm teaching one subject. It is more like healthy lifestyle counseling, but what we do is the basic intro into wellness coaching, partly the concept and partly some practices on how to be with a client. And another part is like a university wellness program. In our university, people still believe that we should not only educate the brain, but that the body plays a part in it. But we practice this in a way that our students have to pass 2 semesters of physical education. So they have swimming classes, tennis, volleyball, whatever they could choose. And somewhere in between this offer is this wellness lifestyle something. So I have 2 groups. Next semester I will have 2 groups of this general class for all the professions.
So that's your professional day job. You're on faculty as an instructor, or what? I don't know what the designations are in your academic system, but
yeah, I don't really know how to say it in English. But
is that like half time for you? How much of your time do you spend at the university?
It changes every semester according to how many classes I teach. Like that, I'm not a full-time academic. Right. When I finished my dissertation, I had to say that I was a bit of burned out. So it was quite a process since 2013 until I finished in 2018. So I'm still a year in recovery from that process. So
yeah, I guess you were that way when we visited you in 2017. Then. So
yeah.
You didn't seem burned out. You gave us a great welcome tour, but
well, it was pleasure having you there and having somebody who understands wellness and who I don't have to explain that I'm not lying with my students in spa. We are not doing massages only or even at all in the classes. So it was quite a process always. And wellness is we have one university in Prague that teaches a wellness class where they share our broader concept of wellness, but outside of the few persons it's still spa. And even my family, I believe, still don't know what is it exactly what I'm doing. So my colleagues at the university don't know what I do in my classes. So yeah, it's an interesting process. But the 5 years of the dissertation were were a pain and a blast at the same time. Yeah, I think what really helped me through that was the National Wellness Institute, because in 2013, when I was writing the master thesis, and in the process of writing it, I thought that the institute could be a good source of some credible information, because you know yourself what Google serves as the quality of information in this field. So I was on their newsletter, and they were sending out invitations to the conference, and they mentioned the students how to say, like a stipend, that the selected students could get the entrance to the conference. And I was okay, so I'm writing here about wellness. Why not do I write a response to this email? And yeah, when I finished my master's, I got the message, and I flew to the States. But it was rather a mission. I called it the wellness mission, the NWC mission, because to fly from from Czech Republic without having been to the States before ever was quite a trip. And I didn't really want to spend the money only for the 4 days of the conference. So I had the idea that I could have an internship. But I had no clue how complicated it is in the States to get an internship. So of course I had nothing arranged before I was leaving for the conference, but I bought my return ticket in 2 months. So I had a plan to be in the States and learn about wellness for 2 months, and I only had a plan for 4 days. And off I flew. And believe me, I was crying when I was buying the ticket. I was scared, because you can imagine what is the impression of Americans we get from the media and from the news, right? It's only murder stories or the political stories. So I was petrified. And and since the first day I arrived to Stevens Point, it was the last year when the conference was still in Stevens Point, and it was like, wow. And I had the first timers badge, so everybody was talking to me and welcoming me in the place. I'm like, wow. I never had this feeling that there was at the conference, on any other academic conferences I've been to before, where everybody is so, very serious, and me being a young student, nobody really talks to me. And there in the Stevens Point, it was as if age didn't matter. People of all ages, whatever professions, whatever careers, whatever importance, which I didn't know by then, they were just friendly and supportive, and they understood what I was trying to learn, and they were really, it was the international group. Yeah, the Bob Boyd and Tom Curry with John Munson. Yeah, without knowing me, John invited me to his house to have a dinner in his porch. I'm like, wow, so this is how Americans approach strangers. Nice. I was afraid of completely different.
Only in the Midwest. If you'd landed in New England or somewhere, it wouldn't have been the same. But I'm so glad you got to experience. Special. Yeah, Stevens Point was magical. It was you got the last one of those, because it went downhill after that. So then how did you spend the rest of those 2 months? Did you find...
Well, in one of the international sessions, I was speaking with Michael Arlowski and John Munson if there were any options to learn about wellness in basically any professional field there was, because every session at the conference was like opening my eyes into like having a wellness nurse. It's a concept that I've never heard of. Even the fact that there were people with wellness written on their business cards, like, wow, I've never seen that before. So anything felt very useful. And it was in the closing reception when I was still having no plan at all, when I was sitting next to John Manson and Alida Munan walked by collecting signatures for a lady who was not present at the conference due to cancer. And he just, connected us and said, Alida, don't you need some people in your hospital as an intern? And she said, of course, I always do need. And I was like, it's like that, just like this, by one sentence. She said, oh, maybe let me check with my kids. So she went to make a phone call, and in 2 or 3 hours, I was sitting in her car driving to Ohio, and I spent the time in Akron, being in the, wellness HR department of the Summa Health System hospitals.
In Akron.
So that's where I spend my time. And Alida was a great teacher. So she gave me all her books and all the printed layouts from the conferences since, I don't know, 93 when she first entered, and when participating each year. And we were driving every day hour to the hospital and an hour back. So we had the longest wellness talks I've ever had, and it was awesome. Yeah, it was really opening my mind. So I came back the next year. I came to the conference 4 years in a row to present and also to intern with Alida in the hospital. And the last year, actually, I spent in Stevens Point with John Manson teaching my dissertation subject, because as a part of my research, I designed a 13 weeks long course based on the wellness inventory, practical classes, how to embody and also reflect on the wellness principles in each of the dimensions. And John Manson helped me talked with Annie Wetter, who was the head of his department after he left. She is the current head of the department in Stevens Point at the university. So my course was offered as a voluntary class for the students. So I spent 6 months in Stevens Point in 2016. Yeah, 2016. And I was interning in the National Wellness Institute. And it was like being in the mecca of wellness, in my mind, being with the people and seeing the background of things. It was when John and Meg Jordan were the presidents together in that time.
Right. And then the year I met you would have been 2015 in Minneapolis. That was the 40th.
Yes.
And when Meg hosted the, what was it that we did some kind of serial thing where I came out as a hippie, and Ann Abbott wouldn't get off the stage, and Meg dragged her off. that was
funny.
Yeah, and Jim introduced us. Now, when did you meet Jim Strohecker?
I can still imagine the moment. It was in 2013 when he was in the the exhibition part.
Right. Big theater.
And he was standing there proudly carrying the wellness inventory to the people. And I was so shy to speak with him because I knew him from the website. And it was the first day in Stevens Point. It was the opening ceremony. And I haven't yet really spoken to anybody. And I was so shy. So it took me like 3 days until Mark, who was working with Jim. So when Jim was gone, I made my small steps to like talk with the other people that were then on the stand. And then he said, yeah, just go and talk to Jim. And always talking to Jim is a blast for me. Maybe it's his philosophical background,
Oh
But
yeah, he's a
we
sweetheart.
can talk for hours. And I
Yeah.
remember in Minneapolis when we were walking to the closing ceremony when you and Donna Ardell and all the founding persons were speaking in the grand reception. We were walking there for like 2 hours, 3 hours maybe, just talking. We skipped some sessions and we were just talking about wellness, what it takes to promote wellness now, what it took to promote wellness in the 70s, in the 80s, what are the differences, what are the similarities. It's, yeah. So thanks to Jim, I took the wellness inventory coaching training to understand the concept better,
Uh-huh.
and I'm still since it was in 2014, and still body coaching the people who are in different time zones than the States. So that was, I guess, somebody from Saudi Arabia, from Belgium, Africa, Maldives. I'll be coaching somebody from Maldives in January, February. So I'm trying to, stay in touch with them.
Well, and I remember in the hallway of the, I guess it was a student union at the university in Minneapolis, Jim introducing us, and then we had our picture taken in front of the sign, and we were goofing off. I don't remember, some goofy picture, and I thought, she's got some spunk. This woman.
Oh yeah. Jim took 2 pictures. The serious one didn't come out very sharp. So the one we have is a goofy picture around the wellness wheel.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I've got that on my computer somewhere. And it was at that point that I hatched the idea of if I ever got to Europe, you suggested you could sponsor a talk or something, and I put that in the back of my mind. And we didn't do it for another 2 years, I think. But when I finally decided we wanted to go see England, Yvonne had wanted to. She'd read Bill Bryson's book, and we wanted to go tromp around England. I thought, well, we're so close, we could fly over to see you, and we did. And I remember that drive up to your place in the dark, and the long country road, and waking up in the morning and seeing the hills, and then getting the grand tour of the university, and then we went into Prague, and I gave that talk at the big theater that had been taken over by the university. And then you got a group of students together, and I had the most wicked hot chocolate I've ever had. It was like pudding. Yvonne still talks about that too. But and I hadn't had, students surrounding me. I'd been teaching at RMIT University, but it was all online. I never met the students. So that was a unique experience, to be feeling like an old professor with the students in a coffee house. And the only time I've ever had that.
But these were very special students, because they were not the students of the university. They were not even a student of mine, but I am involved in Erasmus. It's a European program that supports educators and non-formal teachers, and we hosted a program called Game of Wellness, and people from 8 European countries gathered. And Abul Fazl was a friend of mine from the university, but he was from Iran, joining that program.
Right.
And now I can't remember of the other gentleman who came to meet you. But both of those 2 men, they fell in love with the concept deeply. But this other gentleman, he was from, I can't guess now, but something like Slovenia or Bulgaria, somewhere pretty far. And he traveled to Brno only to hear your talk, but he was late. So he didn't catch you speaking. But with Abul Fazl, they were so super excited to see you in person, that they joined us for the coffee, and I could see their eyes, they were shining. So we took pictures, and we were there then sharing it with all the other people around Europe, like, we met Jack Travis in person. So the Game of Wellness continues.
So Seymour, what's
Yeah,
the game of
and
wellness?
Abu Fazl, in fact, is starting a wellness institute in Iran, or has the intention to do so.
Ah,
So, yeah,
well,
it was fun.
then, so how do you describe your private work and what you've set up? Let's give the viewers the other side besides your academic
Mm.
positions. What?
Mm. Well, I spent now 2 years being involved in this Erasmus program, which is an international education. It is non-formal, so it is less structured than the academic setting, and it allowed me to really um, go more also into the part of personal development, which I can't do that much in the academic setting.
Right.
And it is working with youth workers, with people in education who are willing to work with other people. So quite a specific target group. And and I had a chance to work with great colleagues of mine who are from different countries, and they come from different backgrounds, but with whom we had so how to say, close connection, that in my eyes they were doing wellness, but in theater, but in mindfulness, in nature. So it was 2 years of really collecting the various methods there can be that we can use to spread the wellness message across. And but as I said, it's European funding program, and there is a lot of paperwork, and we have had too many projects in this past year. So I think I'm now recovering from a little burnout in that field. I still have one final report to write, so this is like one chapter of my life that is now closing a bit, because last year, or this year, this summer, we finally got the approval to start a Czech Wellness Institute, officially seated on campus in Brno, but being
Oh,
an independent organization aside of the academic world. And I guess that is where I want to go further with my next steps. The
oh,
individual education, the individual courses and retreats for educators or persons who just want to spend spend some time well. That's something I do because that's the way to put the wellness message across. But I still believe that it is how to say, that there are many people who already do wellness, but they do it in different professions,
right.
and that the support for the helping professionals, and you know that well, is still lacking. We don't, be it teachers, be it nurses, be it activists. We don't really know how to how to take care of ourselves, and the
Yeah.
burnout is even more rising. So I guess this is coming to be the intention of the Czech Wellness Institute, inspired by the American one, by the feeling of the conference, uh, to create a network of like-minded professionals who
And
share the worldview.
this is your brainchild, or you're the primary source of it?
I think it is the primary outlet of my energy and creativity for now.
Uh-huh. But you thought it up all yourself, so you're like the pioneer who's brought that to your country. Wow.
Mm. Well, maybe I could have thought about it by myself, but I had to gather uh, colleagues and the people who would support it. So I started the institute with two colleagues of mine from the
Uh-huh.
university. One was Eva Hrenčířová was my advisor during my dissertation, and another one, Zuzka Přikrylová, she was a colleague of mine, a fellow PhD student, yes, involved in physiotherapy, massage, and yeah, this healthy lifestyle practice. So I connected to this little starting group, and now we are slowly reaching out. So we have like monthly online meetings with the other connections that I met, that I made during the past years in the Czech Republic. So from different professions, different cities. So we are meeting online because, yeah, trying to meet with people live currently seems like great luxury.
Ah,
Yeah.
wow. Well, wish you the best with that. As the one in the U.S. seems to be winding down, yours is winding up. And
Oh, I can't say if it is winding up, but if I can't say where the future will take the institute. It is not that, sometimes I'm envious, like really listening to Bill Hetler and how they started, the American Institute with all the support and all the playground in Stevens Point. I'm like, no, that's not the case here. So I had to forget all the stories I have heard and read. And now it's like rather trying to feel the next steps where it would serve and where it would connect the people when because I really don't want us to burn out in the institute. That's the challenge of it, or the mission of it, that I want the institute to be a supportive and nurturing environment also for us working in it. Yeah. So that's why it's not like a set of workshops all created and all running. No. So it's rather slow, and I hope it will grow more naturally to where it can, flourish without me having to push it. And you can guess I can be the pusher, but but I know what it feels like to lose all my energy by the end of the day. And
yeah. So now you have a doctorate and 2 master's degrees? Master, Dr. Jana.
Yeah, and the wellness freak. Sometimes I feel like the wellness classes are, like running heavy on me. That I should be, the role model of wellness, and I feel like so super out of energy sometimes. So it's a how to say, a laboratory of my life to explore what I'm actually teaching, and that is the beauty of it. That's the horror of it as well.
Well, but, I've always said that we teach what we need to learn, and it's no accident that I wound up in wellness, and also that our wounds, our gifts come out of our wounds. That was Elaine Sullivan's wisdom. You got to know Elaine at conferences. Was she still going?
Yeah, she came to the 40th with yours. So I was in her session, and she nicely, in my mind, it was like another explosion of mind, connecting the poetry to wellness, and give it. And to me, it functioned as an approval that I can go metaphorical or story based in promoting wellness. So now I have a colleague of mine and a dear friend of mine, Eva de Tingerova, who is doing councils based in the tradition of the Ojai Foundation, also an American concept. But it's just sitting in a circle, sharing stories, having for intention, speaking from the heart. And gosh, that is an essential wellness practice. Just being with other people.
So rarely practiced. Now, you're talking about the Ojai Foundation that Joan Halifax started. I visited her there in the 70s, I think it was. She moved on to New Mexico. I'm going to interview her, I hope. But is that the same Ojai Foundation?
I didn't hear. Well, I'm not really in the history of that concept, but the names. There was a book, The Way of Counsel. I'm thinking. Joe Provisor was one of the promoters about councils in schools. They are still like a running center where the community is based on the council principles, if I understood it well. So maybe it is the same, or it is the different Ojai Foundation.
I'll have to look that one up. So, what I wanted to say that during our visit there, the sweetest thing was after the lectures and running around and so forth, because Jim had told me about, and if I pronounce it correctly, Chesney Brumlov, is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm. Chesky Krumlov, yes.
No, it was Bob Boyd telling me about it, and you drove us there at night, and I was asleep in the back seat, I think, 'cause I was exhausted.
And Ivan was supervising me that I drive safely. It was raining. It was quite a rough ride.
And we stayed in that lovely little pension and up in the attic, and it was like being back in Europe in the 60s when I
Yes,
traveled around
yes.
and stayed at youth hostels in those days. So, and what a delight that town was. I sent a friend there who came over last year, and she took a day trip down and got to see it. But I had no concept of how what an important role that the Czech people have contributed to culture, the geniuses, the scientific input, I keep being amazed at inventions that came out of when it was probably still Czechoslovakia, but I've gained, well, getting to know you helped too, but I've gained an enormous respect for what is otherwise a pretty ignorant American provincial Ohio boy worldview. And I'm just delighted that in my interviewing the pioneers from the 70s and 80s, I'm getting to interview the pioneers from the aughts and the teens. That you're playing that role there and seeing it unfold, and wish you the best as it unfolds. So, do you have any parting words to say to our viewers down in the future someday that we hope will get something out of this?
I want to say thank you for the inspiration. for I remember, for me, the most influential statement in the inventory when I first opened it was, I respect myself not only for what I do, but also for who I am. And that stayed with me for long. And I believe that many of the things you describe in the wellness workbook and many of the practices that are, the content of our wellness courses and books are just very natural to humans. And that our task as the wellness promoters is to just remind people of what they would naturally do for themselves.
Yeah.
And I still don't have a clear concept how to bring, because the feedback I get here sometimes is that wellness is an American concept and we are not America. And even speaking about wellness in Czech language can't be, or it's impossible to be a direct translation. So it's maybe the challenge for us as the next generation to find our own vocabulary for the concepts and ideas that are essential, regardless of the culture or the age or the position, that we as humans want to feel well. And that is, that is the core for decision making and future planning.
I remember saying back in the 70s, this is ridiculous. Our grandparents didn't need any of this. It's all because of this crazy lifestyle that we've imposed on our recent generations, that we have to undo a lot of this craziness, from breaking up families and extended families and villages, and the whole nuclear family disaster, and the having to hold 2 jobs to keep your head above water, and all of the modern craziness. Now we have to add in all the texting and carrying phones around, and not being present. But it's we got some work cut out for us, and I'm so delighted to see your generation picking up the ball. And I was going to say that the word wellness in the States doesn't really mean much anyway. It's probably not a good word to pick up. It's the positive psychology movement that I think has stepped in a lot more to the arena that Halbert Dunn was talking about. Between that and the ecological movement of planetary wellness, and you know, there are a number of other disciplines that don't use the word wellness that are really closer aligned to it. So I look forward to your finding the definitions and the vocabulary for the Czech people to.
Actually, it was in my first presentation at university when I was speaking about just the glimpses of wellness, and the feedback from the committee was, don't you really want to choose like a more appropriate word? I'm like, what more appropriate word? It's like a real concept here. And no, I don't want to change it. People ask from time to time, now changing it into well-being or something completely different, or sustainability, whatever. Yeah. But what I personally like is the fact that, at least in my eyes, wellness is for 40 years a theory-based concept. It has books published, it has research done, and it's still not understood. So it's not time yet to leave it abandoned, because it still works. Yeah. And I believe that or at least in Czech Republic, where the wellness industry is not so strong yet, where wellness compared to the States in our country, it's related to feeling good and really feeling well and treating ourselves nicely, which is a different connotation than running around in a fitness center getting an extra, you know, surgery. We have a different journey to take, and especially in those initial years, I guess it's important to have a clear concept. If I speak about sustainability or well-being, I haven't read all those books, but in wellness I already did. So it looks like I personally will stick with this one concept, and I will just try to put it across in the clear, maybe theory-based but practice-supported concept as I understood it. And yeah, for me that was the answer. The others have to decide for themselves. Yeah.
Well, following your heart, that's all you can do. So, yeah. Well, thank you, Jana, for getting up early there to and throwing your husband out of the hotel or the apartment. And
he's fine.
At least it's not the middle of the night. And I'm delighted that you're the youngest interviewee I've done so far. And it's a refreshing break from us old farts that have barely figured out how to use our Zoom. And, we're struggling with technology. So thank you again. I'm going to end the recording now.
Thank you.
And